Hello, and welcome to this Qubit On Demand webinar, Would You Bet Your Job on Your A/B Test Results? We were joined on this webinar by Anjali Yakkundi of Forrester Research, Will Browne of Qubit, and Melanie Kyrklund of Staples. We're going to start this webinar with Anjali Yakkundi from Forrester, who will be talking to us about the 5 digital experience technology trends to guide your investment.
Why digital experience matters and why the technologies behind them matter. So we'll start off with talking about that imperative. Then we'll move to key digital customer experience technologies and what technologies you're going to think to source in order to support this new imperative. Then we'll move to the 5 trends that are going to guide your digital experience technology investment and how A/B testing fits into those. And last, we'll wrap up with some recommendations. So let's first talk about why the digital experience imperative matters and why this technology matters. We're in a new age that us at Forrester call the age of customer. It used to be that your strategic source of differentiation was manufacturing or distribution, or maybe even the age of information, where connected PCs and supply chains meant that those who controlled the information flow were those who had a competitive advantage. Now it's a different age. Now it's the age of the customer. This means that your competitive and key source of differentiation from your biggest competitors is going to come by your level of customer obsession and how engaging and how you are engaging your customers and delivering relevant experiences to your customer. Because frankly, today your customers have too many options. And if you don't deliver that engaging, relevant experience to your customer, they're going to go to your closest competitor instead, who's probably going to show them that relevant information and engaging experience. You can think about this with companies like Apple as a very famous one, or IBM or Best Buy. These are organizations that are doing this now. And we think about why this is happening. It's really because your customers are always connected. And this is a data that we have at Forrester of almost 30,000 North American online adults who are using their smartphone. You can see that your customers are connected at every point of their life. In every room of the house. I find the bathroom interesting. 50% are actually connected while they're in the bathroom. You're connected while you're traveling. 45% while in public transportation. 48% during their daily commute. 68% while in the car. I'm not sure if that's safe, but 68% are actually using the internet on their phone while they're in the car. They're doing it at every other phase of life. I know many of you are retailers on the phone, so 68% of your customers are using their smartphone to access the internet while they're in stores, and they possibly might be looking up your competitor while they're in your store. It is not just that your customers are always connected, but they're always on multiple devices. So we have some data here to show that, and this is a phenomenon that many of you may know as the second screen. So 81% of customers are using smartphone and television. 66% are using smartphone and laptop PC. 66% are using your laptop PC and television. This means that your customers are not only always connected, and so always distracted while they're going about their daily lives, they're also even more distracted because they're often using multiple devices at once. And this is the age of the customer because you're going to need to sustain your customer's attention with engaging experiences. So many of your competitors are competing for that customer's attention and are delivering optimized, relevant experiences. And so if you don't sustain your customer's attention, they will go to your competitor. And delivering these engaging experiences requires strong technology management. I think many of you might have heard that the story that IT is dead, IT is a dinosaur, and marketing is king. We at Forrester don't believe that. Instead, we believe that to deliver these engaging experiences requires strong management of technology, whether it comes from an IT group or a marketing technology group, a marketing group, or a line of business group. You need that strong management of technology. Let's dive a little deeper into how you're going to actually deliver this with technology management and talk about key digital customer experience technologies. This is the reference architecture that we've created at Forrester to understand the different technologies and use cases of how you're going to use different technologies. So it starts with the management layer. This is the foundational layer that's helping you enable your marketers to create and manage digital experiences. So this is things like your content and data services, your repository, workflow, authoring tools, campaign management tools. This is really fundamental to how you're managing the experience. The next layer is the engagement layer. This layer is all about how you're going to deliver the experience and how you're going to deliver a relevant, personal, and optimized experience across channels. This is going to include functionality like presentation management or managing transactions. This is going to include content and experience targeting. This is going to include things like ad serving. This layer, this engagement layer, is all about delivering the experience. And then the top layer is going to be about how you're measuring that experience. So this measurement layer is all about giving you as marketers insight into multi-channel experience patterns and consumption. So how your customers are engaging with you. This is going to include functionality like testing and analytics and even marketing dashboards. And you can see from this reference architecture how solutions easily map onto this. So the management layer is all about things like digital asset management or product information management or campaign management. The engagement layer is about your core digital experience platforms like commerce platforms, and web content management, but with other tools that help deliver more optimal experiences like testing and optimization solutions. And your measurement layer includes not just testing, but also things like web analytics, social analytics, and mobile analytics. These solutions together make up what we at Forrester believe is the digital experience technology ecosystem. And there's many more niche players here, but these are what we feel are some of the main ones. You can think about this, here we're today talking a little bit more in depth about A/B testing, how testing and optimization are important here. Not only does testing give you insight into how customers are how they're interacting with different types of experiences and able to test which experience is better, but also helps you optimize that experience. And this is where I think the power comes from. It's the ability to actually optimize and deliver a better experience for your customers. I think there's a challenge with some of the other vendors in this space, particularly commerce vendors and web content management vendors, who've always been trying to deliver an optimal experience. But they've often been relegated to delivering more nuts and bolts functionality. Like, for example, commerce vendors are typically focusing more and more on things like managing the transaction and functionality like shopping cart functionality. Web content management vendors are very preoccupied with the presentation layer and how they're going to manage templates. There's an opportunity here for you to use testing and optimization vendors in order to add more of the value and deliver more of that relevant experience and optimized experience. So now that we've talked a little bit about the key technologies and how testing and optimization fits into that, let's talk about 5 trends that are going to guide your digital experience technology investment in the next 12 to 24 months. So I have 5 principles here that when I think you're looking at new technology to consider. The first is that this is the beginning of the end of the all-in-one suite. So vendors that are promising you that they can do everything are lying. They can't do everything. And even if they could, only 9% of our surveyed digital experience decision makers actually preferred a suite approach. There are a lot of reasons for this, but I think it starts with the fact that first, no vendor can do everything right now. The second is that even if they could, you have too many existing investments to rip and replace everything you have to incorporate this new all-in-one suite. You don't want to rip and replace everything you already have. That's too costly, too time-consuming, and too disruptive to your business. The third is that even if one vendor did offer all of this and you could rip and replace everything, you're putting too much investment into one vendor and all of your eggs are in one basket. So that's the first main principle. And when you're thinking of testing and optimization solutions, look to source best of breed when necessary. I think this is when these are spaces that require more of a best of breed touch. So our second principle is that tools need to create business value out of data. I think we've all on the phone heard about big data and heard the buzz around big data. But it's not just about big data. It's really how you're going to take that data and create business value out of it. So when you're looking to solutions, both testing but also other solutions. Look for solutions that effectively harness that customer data, including things like social media data and even things like product data. Look how they're looking to all of this data that you have available in order to create and optimize experiences. This is big data. It's not just how you're going to take all of the data in the world. It's really looking at what is the most relevant data and how you're going to optimize based on this. The third principle is that tools must support personalized experiences. So I think we've heard about personalization for a long time. I actually dug up an article the other day from 1999 talking about how web personalization is overrated. So we've been talking about this for 15 years. That to me is pretty mind-blowing. I think, though, that the reason why personalization initiatives have often failed is because they're thinking too narrow. We at Forrester believe that the next generation of personalization is really going to harness more contextual input. So things around your customer's situation, so device type, location, time of day, weather. What is your situation of your customer, and how are you going to harness that data to optimize an experience? And also, what about real-time optimization? You have a lot of customer data about what they've done in the past, not just a couple months ago, but what they did a few weeks ago or yesterday, and what they're doing in their current session right now. You have an ability to use all of that data to optimize an experience. You actually have an opportunity to predict what the customer's likely next step is. I think the prediction element, which we often see in predictive analytics types of solutions, this is probably a few years out still, but still look to vendors that are able to support that more personalized experience and how they're going to optimize the experience and deliver targeted experiences to your customer segments based on these inputs. And maybe look to vendors who have a future vision on the prediction element, since that's not quite a reality right now. Our next principle is that you're going to look for more than software. So for any of you on the phone who are more kind of from a traditional IT background, I think typically we've looked at sourcing software differently. Things like your ERP solution or maybe even email. You're not going to look for that now. You're really going to look for a business solution. And you need to look for solutions that help marketers and business users adapt to changing customer needs. And you need them to be able to do it quickly. This is going to be key, to do it quickly. Look for solutions then that do things like keep IT out of critical publishing paths. Don't look for solutions that require code to do anything to publish an experience. Also look for solutions that have prioritized user interface. So something that's easy to use that any marketer can learn within a few hours. Don't look for complex solutions that are hard to use. So you're really going to look for a business solution. You're not looking for software. And I think this is key for something like A/B testing when you're really looking for your marketers to move fast with this software. And 5, multi-channel isn't going to go away. So you must look for solutions that prioritize delivering optimized multi-channel experiences. So now it's desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone. What's next? Maybe the Google Glass. Maybe smart TV will continue to explode. You're going to really need to look to solutions that are prioritizing delivering these multi-channel experiences. Too many solutions now only prioritize one channel and delivering to one channel. Look instead to solutions that are looking at the whole multi-channel, omni-channel experience. So with that, those are the 5 priorities. I'll wrap up with a few recommendations before I turn it over to Will. 3 recommendations, if you can leave you with anything, is the first one, that you can't do all this at once. This idea of a digital experience imperative is ongoing, and it'll be a journey. So really prioritize key customer touch points and where you're going to first start by delivering better digital experiences. The second is to assess your current technology gap. From organizations that I'm talking to, the most prevalent gaps that I see are around optimization. So how are you going to not just deliver a static experience, but continually optimize on that experience, both manually with testing, but also even automatically? How are you going to also deliver personalization? I still see a lot of organizations struggling with personalization. So how are you going to deliver optimal experiences to your different customer segments? based on all of those different situational and contextual inputs that we talked about. The third is multi-channel delivery. So how are you going to deliver across channels? Many organizations still have gaps and struggle around this. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that when you're looking to source new tools, don't look to buy this all from one vendor. Instead, look at vendors who are going to help you connect the dots and who are going to look to integrate with your existing stack and integrate into your existing ecosystem. All right, thank you. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Will.
Thank you very much, Anjali. So today we're going to be talking about the 5 fundamental A/B testing mistakes and how to avoid them. Now, as Anjali said, marketers to prove the value of data and technology to the business. And this value comes from learning about your customers, from improving your conversion rates, and from improving that digital customer experience. The best way to prove this value is through A/B testing. And we're very fortunate today that there are a lot of vendors out there that provide A/B testing software, so implementing this stuff isn't particularly difficult. However, as an industry, we really need to move away from this focus on green ticks in a dashboard. Yes, it's statistically significant uplift, so that means it's fantastic. And we need to move towards looking at tests that generate long-lasting uplifts in revenue. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call today who might have seen in their platform loads of tests with 10 to 30% uplifts, but they haven't seen that same effect reflected in their bottom line. Now, today, I hope to explain a little bit about how that can happen, an introduction to a few key concepts in A/B testing, and work with an example of what happens when stuff goes wrong. A lot of people might ask initially, why do I have to test? Well, if you just make a change to the website and compare the effect after to the time before, you can't say anything. There are outside external factors that are going to affect this. Seasonality, competitor activity, any analysis that comes from this kind of before and after or sequential testing is going to be pretty weak. You have to A/B test. It's the best, simplest way to business value of your digital technology. It's the same methodology that's used to prove that smoking gives you lung cancer and to ensure that when you take a pregnancy test, you're probably pregnant. So we know it's good. But it's the only way we can get close to cause and effect. So this is what we have to do. There are costs associated with it. This is fine, we understand these. There's a monthly cost for a testing platform. That's going to be taken into account. There's the salaries and the time of your developers and your team. And there's also this kind of often missed cost, which is the lost revenue from implementing changes that do not do anything for your site or potentially actively harm your revenue. So as A/B testing practitioners, it's our job, and we're here to show you how to reduce these costs and increase your ROI. Firstly, we've got to find the ideas that are likely to have a real positive effect on user behavior, our true winning tests. We've got to detect as many of these true winners as possible, and we've got to minimize the chance of finding tests that look like winners but have no true effect. First, let's start with that first idea. So find the ideas that most likely to have a real positive effect on user behavior. Now, spot the difference. I think it's fairly obvious here that the words "I'm Bill" and "I'm Matt" stand out, and the subtle difference in the colour of their ties is perhaps less obvious. Now, the same is true on A/B testing. It's much easier for us to detect these big differences. It's much easier for us to detect big differences in user behavior. So, you should be testing things that are likely to cause a big difference in user behavior and things that are important for your business. The question, should I offer free shipping? Does the cost of free shipping outweigh the benefits of conversion rate? This is a pretty important business question, and it's very likely to have a large effect on user behavior. To contrast with that, trying to find out what is the optimum font for your product page, so what font's going to work best, that's probably not as important a business question, and the effect you're going to see is much smaller. So you have to prioritize these big effects. And we understand that coming up with good ideas and ideas that do have a big effect is difficult, but this is where data can really help out. So by analyzing user behavior, the way that customers move through your site, and getting any feedback you can from these users, that drives the hypotheses and the ideas that you'll then go on to test. So, finding winning tests. Finding winners, size does matter here. And it's a really important point. If you don't collect a large enough sample size, if you don't collect enough data, you're going to miss winning tests. You're not going to be able to detect these tests that will drive real value to your website. Let me explain how this might be the case. If I give you 2 coins, one coin is a fair coin. It lands heads 50% of the time. The other coin is a weighted coin. And this gives me heads 55% of the time. So the question I have is, if you can get this coin right, if you can guess which one is which, I'll give you £1 million. But if you get it wrong, you give me £1 million. And these are the kind of effect sizes we might see in a big e-commerce business. This is not unfeasible. But how many times would you flip each coin to work this out? If you flip each coin 10 times, you might get 5 in one, 6 in the other. That's not enough to discriminate. 100? 100,000? I mean, the point here is that if you don't collect enough data, if you don't do enough coin flips, you're not going to be able to distinguish between a winning test and a test that does nothing. Now, in an ideal situation, what we'd like to do is be 100% certain. But that is just not possible, really. I mean, there's a limit of time, right? We couldn't flip coins forever, and we can't collect information about users forever. So we have to compromise here. The way we compromise is that we collect enough data so that we can detect a win, if one exists, 80% of the time. And that's a fairly scientific standard. So, how many coins would be enough to prove that one coin was weighted? Quite a few. It's impossible to be 100% certain, but the more data you have, the closer you can get. And we follow a scientific standard and wait until there's an 80% chance of detecting a difference if that difference exists. So what you need to do is you need to calculate the sample size prior to a test to work out what this 80% figure is. There's lots of online calculators you can use, or if you want to understand a little bit more about this concept, then please feel free to email in. All right, minimizing the chance of finding tests that look like winners but have no true effect. So I'm going to use quite a silly example here, but if you haven't guessed, I am a man, and if I take a pregnancy test, and the pregnancy test tells me that I'm pregnant, in 9 months' time, I'm not going to be giving birth. And similarly, if I get a 20% uplift in my A/B test, I might not see that 20% uplift 9 months down the line. In both cases, you can get these false positives. The test says one thing, the truth is something else. And this is a really important point to get over, that the tests can be wrong. And a really good way of finding that is using an AA test. So we tend to assume that we get a 5% false positive rate. We can work that out. But we could test it using an AA test. So we'll get our 5% false positive rate. We'll run our AA test. So we'll show 2 groups exactly the same thing. All we're doing is splitting traffic, right? There's no actual difference between these 2 groups. And what we'll see, out of 100 AA tests, we'll see 5 winners. Now, these aren't real winners. These are just things that our test framework have detected that aren't real. They're false positives. So this sounds pretty simple. It doesn't sound like it would be a big problem, right? But what happens when we start using 20 variants in one test? 30 variants, 40 variants. Say we want to know what color button we should use on a product page for our add to bag button. And we do 20 different variants. Now, the chances are we're going to get a winner here because we know we're getting a 5% false positive rate. So even if all these buttons did absolutely nothing and there was no difference between them, we're still likely to see one winner, which is good. In our dashboard, we'll have this big green tick and everyone's happy. But that's not driving those long-term uplifts that we're talking about. That's a false positive. That's a bit of a fantasy. Now, in a similar way to doing lots of variants within the same test, actually checking a test every day, so checking a test multiple times, has a very similar effect. So if I start making decisions on the first day of my test, when I know that my test should be running for 30 days because I've calculated the sample size required, if I start checking on that first day and that second day and that third day and that fourth day, it's like having multiple variants, and I'm more likely to see this false positive. So I've taken my pregnancy test, it's come back positive. The first thing I'm going to do is take another one. I want a second opinion. Now the same is true for A/B testing. when you get a positive result, you can check again. You can run the same thing again to make sure it wasn't a fluke, to make sure it wasn't a statistical anomaly. So at Qubit, what we do is we say, yes, we are going to validate these tests, and we're going to validate them in a way that makes the most out of the information we already have. So we run a 95-5 split. That is, 95% of traffic sees the variant and 5% sees the control. So we are monitoring the test, and we are ensuring that we see the same uplift in this validation period as we would do during the test period. We're also taking account that, yes, we do know that it's likely to be a winner. Now, they're all great concepts, and I'm sure, so maybe that stuff's a little bit new to some people here. So I'm going to go through a kind of a worked example. So let me introduce you to Mr. Bean and his jelly bean shop. Here he has an e-commerce store which sells jelly beans, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through a year of his testing. So we're going to look forward at the year ahead at what he does. So Mr. Bean has a 1% conversion rate, seems fair enough. And over the course of this next year, he's going to run 20 different tests. He's got 20 ideas he wants to test out. Out of these 20 ideas, he's got 2 good tests. 2 tests that, if you implemented them, they would have an uplift of 5%. Also 2 bad tests, which will have uplift, if that's the right word, of -5%. So these are going to have a negative effect on conversion rate. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare the correct method with perhaps a naive method. So let's see what happens when we run these 2. In the correct method, what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the sample size required for this test. We're going to wait for that sample size to be reached. We're going to perform our statistical test. We're going to see if it looks significant. And then if we get a significant result, we're going to validate it by running the test again. In the naive method, we're not going to do that. We're just going to check the test every day. And if we see a positive, significant result, we're going to say, yes, that's a win. I'll take that and I'll put down the observed as my uplift. So what happens? We do the 20 tests over the year. The correct method identifies both winners, so we get the 2 winners there, but it also identifies a false positive. The naive method identifies 9 winners, so we've got 7 false positives here. It's not looking great. We perform our validation. How much we see? Actually, yeah, there was a false positive there, so now the correct method aligns with the truth, whilst the naive method still maintains that we have 9 winners. Total uplift. Well, the truth, we know we had 2 of 5% uplift. Correct method said, yes, we've got 2 tests of around 5%. Over the naive method, because we're stopping early, we're much more likely to get really bad measurements of what that conversion rate uplift is. So we've got some things at 5%, some things at 40%, some things at 25%. I'm sure if you're looking at a dashboard, you'll see the same things, green ticks with really varying statistics here. And that's what you'll see here. And it's very tempting to say, okay, well, 9 winners is way better than 2 winners. I mean, it's a very tempting fantasy to want to live with, but there are consequences of living in this fantasy world. So we've got our correct method. We know that we've reported 2 tests with a 5% uplift, and we've delivered 2 tests with about 5% uplift. The naive method, well, we've reported 9 winning tests with some tests winning by up to 40%, 30%, some winning by 5%, but we've delivered, yeah, we've detected 2 winning tests. There's also a chance we've implemented those negative tests. We could have negatively affected our bottom line by doing A/B testing if we don't do this properly. Now, what does this mean for your business? Wasted resource. Using the correct method, we haven't wasted any resource. Sure, we validated our test, we found a false positive, and now we're only putting work and resource into things that are going to have a positive. Naive method, we've spent time and effort putting live on our site 7 unnecessary tests. What about those other things? About learning about our customers, about improving the experience of our customers? Well, yeah, and thinking the correct method, we have improved the customer experience, and we have understood more about what our customers like and don't like. We know what works, we know what doesn't work. Naive method, the customer experience is degraded. There's 7 unnecessary things that are changing on the website that don't have to. And our understanding of the customer, well, is a bit confused. We know some things seem to work, but then if we did them again in the future, they wouldn't. So what actually do our customers want? We get less information from this testing. And finally, maybe important for some of you, well, if you go telling someone that you're going to give them 9 tests with a 15% uplift or something similar, then it's going to be pretty angry when you only deliver something around 10%. Whilst if you say you give 2 tests with a 5% uplift, and you see at the end of the year the bottom line goes up by 10%, you're going to have a happy manager. If anyone has any questions about how this stuff is calculated, if you can go on to our website and download our latest white paper, there's some code in the appendix there, which will let you simulate this, or you can email me, and I'm happy to send over some way of you replicating this kind of analysis. So let's conclude. Let's go over this and really hammer home what we need to do. The first mistake, not A/B testing. A/B testing is an incredibly powerful tool. We have to use it. It's our best way of measuring cause and effect, and it will mean that you will get incremental gains over time if you do it properly. Mistake 2, not prioritizing tests properly. There's no point testing margins and fonts when you've got bigger fish to fry. Test the things that are going to have a big difference in behavior and are likely to have a big impact. Test them first. Mistake 3, not waiting for significance and sample size. We've got to calculate sample size, and we've got to wait until that sample size is reached before we do anything. When that sample size has been reached, we do a test for significance, and if it is significant, then we might as well think, okay, great, we might have a winner here. Mistake 4, if we do that, but with 20 variants, we're very likely to get a winner, and that's because it's very likely. And the final mistake is not validating. When we validate, we find these false positives, we start getting closer to the truth. If we don't, we're left pretty blind. So as a kind of final metaphor for what I've been trying to say today, you don't have to be a mechanic, and similarly, you don't have to be a statistician to do A/B testing. But what you do need is a good statistical engine to drive you forward. And if you don't, then you might fall down a bit. So here's a few questions you have to ask if you're going to go forward with A/B testing. How do you prioritize your tests? How do you calculate the sample size required? How do you account for the multiple testing problem? And how do you validate winning tests? Now, unacceptable answers to this are things like, it doesn't affect us. This isn't a problem, because this is a problem for everybody. And the sooner the industry recognises that these are problems and starts to address them, the more effective A/B testing will become, and the better the results you'll get out of it. Thank you very much. If you have any detailed questions about what I've spoken about today, please email me or research@qubitdigital.com, and we'll get back to you with any response you have. I'm also going to be taking questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Will. We'll now be handing over to Melanie, who will be taking us through how to run a successful A/B testing program.
Great, thanks a lot, and thanks, Will, for that interesting presentation. I'm definitely in agreement with all the points you raised. So the focus of my presentation is going to be how to run a successful testing program. But before I begin, I'll quickly cover off my background. I've been working in online for over 10 years, and I've been in testing roles for about 5 of those. And I've worked across the maturity spectrum, really. So companies where conversion optimization initiatives were in their infancy, through to leaders in the space. So the focus of this presentation will be in part about my work at Staples, but also about the perspective I've gained overall on how to deliver results in this space. So owners of A/B testing programs play a key role in driving and optimizing the on-site customer experience. So this was mentioned earlier by Anjali. So 5 years ago, most companies viewed A/B testing predominantly as the UX optimization tool, and that foundation still exists. So the process of understanding customer pain points to drive improved functionality, content, and navigation. But nowadays, the ability to serve targeted experiences on the fly based on web behavior or customers' interaction with marketing campaigns also falls into the remit of testing. In addition, persuasion techniques have also grown in popularity over the last few years. So that means layering the customer experience with urgency, scarcity, social proof messaging, for example. So understanding the psychology of your website visitors. So unlike classic customer marketing programs where messaging is based on the known purchasing behavior of recognized customers, the scope of A/B testing tools in customer marketing is much broader, because using the disciplines shown here, you have the potential to drive a better and more relevant experience for every single customer. And that's what I find really inspiring about A/B testing. And also being aware of this can really help you to unlock the full potential of your A/B testing program. So even though testing programs have the potential to generate substantial results, in many organizations, there are in fact multiple barriers to getting the program up and running and delivering. Of course, there are leading companies within the space where testing is at the heart of their day-to-day operations, but for most companies, the reality is rather different. So you might encounter resource issues, there might be a scarcity of analyst, design, or development resource. You may have operational constraints, so you may need to plan your testing around existing items on the development roadmap, and that can really limit the scope of your testing in some site areas. There also may be multiple stakeholders within the online space that you need to align with in order to get anything done. And then there's a challenge of instilling a data-driven culture across the business as a whole. So even though you're committed to validating everything you're doing online, other business units, which also impact the online experience, aren't doing the same thing. So all the above really creates complexity and can slow you down. Furthermore, a lot of testing is required to deliver results. So for anyone who has any experience in testing, they will know that it's a humbling experience. It takes a lot of effort to generate a win. From my experience, I can estimate that anything between 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 tests will deliver a statistically significant result. So in addition to the operational issues I mentioned previously, you also need to maintain a rapid pace of testing within these organizational constraints. So building a program that is consistently delivering is certainly no easy task. With all these things considered, I've discovered over the years that the two factors that are critical in building a successful testing program are your approach. So that means the methodology you use for idea generation. So Will has touched this already to some extent. So focusing on data, on big ideas, and adhering to this methodology will really drive the quality of your hypotheses and of your tests. The second critical factor is the speed at which you move. Within this section on speed, I'll cover off some of the operational and prioritization aspects which can help facilitate this. So first of all, I'll cover off the right approach to optimization. I'd say at the highest level, simply don't limit yourself. As mentioned previously, A/B testing has the potential to drive an improved experience for every single customer. And you have a number of levers at your disposal, such as UX optimization, personalization, and persuasion. The second really fundamental aspect to your approach is that you use data to understand how visitors are using your site and what isn't working. So using standard analytics suites such as Google Analytics, Site Catalyst will give you a high-level view of site performance, the performance of larger segments, how they're using the site, top paths to purchase, exit points. But I think ideally you should use tools such as Adobe's Discover or even Qubit, which allow you to drill down into segment behavior in more detail. Also, collecting qualitative customer feedback on site, particularly for non-purchasers, is really useful in understanding why visitors aren't converting and ensuring you focus on the most important user experience issues. I think this feedback is also really important in that it should be shared with the broader business because it can really help to drive, let's say, higher level initiatives. So fixing your site speed, content development, or even your pricing strategy. I'd also say that if you're working over multiple domains or countries, always prioritize your highest traffic and revenue markets first. But I'd also suggest you look for insights at local level. So really try and understand, what the challenges are within that market. And then only at a second stage, identify solutions which can be tested in similar markets. Persuasion is another interesting area to look at for hypothesis formation. So ways you can layer persuasive elements into the site experience, like urgency, social proof, scarcity. And generally speaking, look at ways you can incorporate successful concepts elsewhere in the user journey. So if, for example, review ratings have worked well on your product pages, try incorporating them and testing them into your email product promotions as well. I also appreciate that on some occasions there may be less time for analysis. Will already mentioned that it takes a long time to come up with good ideas. Also, in reality, some tests may be awaiting sign-off. So in those cases, I think it makes sense to throw some quick UX testing in the mix, just to keep your testing program moving. So an example of this would be, for example, testing list versus grid view on your search results. So these are experiments that are easy to set up. They're important site areas, and they can provide useful learnings to the business, even though they're not necessarily the most data-driven. And then finally, as you pull together your testing strategy and ideas, it's important to really thoroughly research and quantify each opportunity. So really look at how many visitors you're impacting with this test, your expected uplift, and your expected incremental revenue. And this way you can ensure that you're focusing on the biggest wins. Also, the more you test, the better you'll become at estimating uplifts and incremental revenue over time. So I just wanted to show a few experiments that were run here at Staples using this methodology. So the first example is based on customer feedback, which we received to the site, which indicated that customers were just failing to notice that we had a click and collect service. So we went through a few iterations and then implemented this quite prominent in-page message saying that a product was available for click and collect, and also explaining to customers how they could redeem this service through the payment flow. The second idea was grounded in the area of persuasion research. So our product's review rating and also the percent of customers who would recommend the product weren't very visible on the page. They were on a review tab below the image. So we actually made this information a lot more visible on product pages. The third is a simple personalization put in place. This was for customers entering our site from Google, looking for ink and toner products. And we targeted these customers with a layer directing them to our ink and toner finder, which was converting better than on-site search for this product category. So the second aspect, which is really important in driving your testing program, is maintaining a rapid pace of testing. So if you're already testing and only managing a few tests a month, it is likely that you're not really generating substantial results, even though your methodology might be sound. So you should work out where the bottleneck is that is preventing you from running, let's say 10 tests per month, and work out how much and what type of additional resources are required. And then have an open conversation about the untapped potential of the program to secure the help you need. And, in my experience, I say you shouldn't put this conversation off. If you have a couple of wins under your belt, it can certainly help in building your case and in showing the potential of the program. Another option is, if you can't secure the resources readily internally, is to speak to your testing tool provider to understand what managed services they might be able to offer you. So these can range from help in design and development, so actually on the test implementation phase, through to help in hypothesis generation and analysis. So if you're actually at the stage of assessing testing tool providers, the ease of use and the test time to market should certainly play a big part in shaping your decision. So the second aspect associated with moving fast is your prioritization process. So Will also touched upon this earlier. But basically, what this boils down to is picking the tests that are easiest to implement and with reasonable test durations. So low traffic pages, smaller visitor segments will simply take too long to reach significance. And similarly, multivariate tests or tests with, 4 or 5 different iterations will definitely need a lot more traffic. So it's useful to build a central repository of test ideas. So this can be, a wiki, a Google Doc, an Excel file. And basically, in this document, you log all your test ideas along with all these variables. So the expected incremental revenue, the implementation estimate, and the test duration. And this way, you can make sure that you're focusing on the biggest and the quickest wins as you prioritize tests every week. So in conclusion, I think testing programs have the potential to create a more relevant experience for every website visitor. However, even the right methodology, with the right methodology, you won't be able to deliver the results unless you're keeping up the pace of testing. So consider the resources you require to achieve a rapid time to market upfront. And all of this operational process needs to be supported by data-driven idea generation and prioritization. And lastly, you'd also have to adhere to the statistical best practice as already covered off by Will. And thanks for listening. That concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you very much. We're very nearly done here. We just have, if you have any questions, please could you let us know. We have a few coming in, so we'll just get to those in a second. And in the meantime, we'd also just like to point out that a lot of what particularly Will has been saying has been presented in this research here, which is results are illusory, which you can find on this link. And you can also see this in an infographic, which you can see there's all the links there. So, I mean, we've first of all got a couple of questions about will a deck or replay option be available? I'd just like to say, first of all, that yes, they will be. We'll be sending them out to any attendance or anything that's going to, any attendance and sign-ups that's signed up for this. We also have a question for Anjali. So I'll just unmute her. And Anjali, how will the marketing and e-commerce team have to adapt to the changes that have to come?
That's a great question. I think when we're looking at e-commerce teams, particularly, I think there's been a move to work on a project-by-project basis. And I don't think that's sustainable. So I think this is going to be one of the big changes that will come for e-commerce teams, is to manage some of these core platforms and move beyond just working on a project-by-project basis. Because eventually, when you do that, you're going to have a lot of disconnected solutions. That's kind of the first thing I see with the big change in some of the e-commerce teams. The second, I think, is to hire some of these new roles and think about how we're different ways to organize and to hire for some of these roles. Certainly, data experts are one of the big roles. And in our most recent survey for digital experience decision makers, which includes e-commerce teams, the number one thing people are looking for and lacking was data experts, followed closely by UX specialists. So I think looking and finding that new talent is going to be a real key challenge for e-commerce teams. I think to me, those are the two biggest ones that come to mind for commerce teams and how they're going to need to adapt to this new change. Certainly, there are many others. We already talked about delivering personal experience multi-channel, but I think those are two other ones that come first to mind.
Great, thank you very much. We have one for Melanie, which says, what kind of persuasion research have you used in your testing?
Well, I've used if that means in terms of persuasion techniques, I've used social proof. One second. Social proof and urgency are the two main testing streams I've used.
And we also have another question, which is, how is Staples sourcing customer feedback?
Well, currently it's through Qubit, actually. So that's the main source. And then we have a survey that goes out via email monthly to our existing customers. So we have the perspective both from non-purchasers on the web as well as our existing customer base.
Great, thank you very much. We have a question which I think is for Will. When trying to determine the success of a test, is it important that each KPI or goal that is being measured is a statistically significant win? If data showed that visitors to a particular test variation was a winner in revenue, but did not perform as well or as well with significance in another metric like clicks, would you call it a win?
And this is a good question, and a lot of people try and use different metrics. Now, what I was speaking about earlier with if you have lots of variations, you're increasing the chance of getting a false positive. It's actually the same thing here. If you have a lot of different KPIs, instead of, say, 20 different button colors, if you had 20 different KPIs you're measuring, you're very likely that one of these KPIs can look like a statistically significant win. So we'd always recommend you have one main KPI which you're using to measure the success of your test, and any kind of post-hoc analysis to give you further ideas or hypothesis you want to test can be measured by secondary KPIs. But we wouldn't say you judge the performance of your test on these secondary KPIs because it will increase your probability of a false positive.
And we also have another question for Will, which is the correct measure for statistical significance for a test?
So statistical significance, we were thinking about whether we were going to talk about it within the basically, what for a lot of test software, self-testing software out there, what it actually means is, what is the probability that we would observe this bigger difference just by chance? So if I give an example, say we had that fair coin, we're flipping a coin. Now, a fair coin, the most probable thing we're going to get if we flipped it 10 times is 5 heads, say. So we flip a coin 10 times, we get 5 heads. Now, what's quite unlikely is that we get 10 heads in a row. So what this statistical significance test is doing is actually working out how unlikely is the result we've observed. How unlikely is it I observe a 5 in one and a 10 in the other? And if the probability that we observe a difference that is that big or greater is less than 5%, then we're going to call it a winner. So we have this threshold of the difference being from the same kind of thing, but just really far out, is less then we call that statistically significant. So yeah, use coins to think about it. Makes a lot more sense to use that.
Great, thank you very much. We have one question again for Anjali, which is, do you see any company being able to adapt to a more suite approach ever, or do you think it is truly the death of it?
That's a great question. I think companies that I see looking to a suite approach are more small to medium-sized businesses, because typically the investment isn't there already in existing technologies, and it's okay not to have best-of-breed functionality in every area around digital experience delivery. So I think that's probably one of the biggest exceptions where we've seen the suite approach being more popular. And if you saw our survey data, where only 9% preferred the suite approach. We're primarily surveying enterprise decision makers from companies with over 1 billion in revenue. So I think smaller organizations who are possibly under 1 billion in revenue, then I think the suite approach is a little bit more viable. And for other organizations, I think it's they're still going to be sourcing together. So certain tools have affinities together. So, I also cover content management. Content management technology like web content management and digital asset management have an affinity for one another. So it's often sourced together. Similarly, we've been talking about testing, sometimes A/B testing has an affinity with optimization solutions and possibly even some like analytics functionality. So those types of tools are often sourced together. So I don't think you're going to necessarily have to buy best of breed of every single technology, but you might be looking to package some of them together and piece those larger packages together. So I think those are the two big exceptions to that rule of when you're going to buy best of breed versus a suite.
Great, thank you very much. I think we have time for just one more question, which I think is probably one for both Will and Melanie. So I'll hand it to Will first. Perhaps Melanie can answer this one first. When is the right time to kill a test idea and no longer iterate upon it?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, actually.
I think they want to
I mean, obviously, if you have a negative effect immediately, then it depends on how much you believe in your hypothesis and how much you believe in the solution you're trying to implement for the customer. So in the case of the click and collect experiment that I showed, actually the first two iterations were completely neutral, but based on the volume of customer feedback coming in, I felt that this was something we needed to get right for our customers. And in fact, at the third attempt, we did get it right. So I suppose the time you should kill the test, it varies, and that will depend on how much you believe in what you're currently trying to implement.
No, I completely agree with that. And I mean, there are cases where you have a really good idea, and it is just the implementation of that idea that isn't a success. So you might have a bug in the JavaScript that is deploying this test, or it's just implemented in a way that's not visually appealing, and then a change in the way it's expressed actually makes the test a win. So yeah, there's certainly good ideas that just aren't expressed to the user in the right way. Sure, I think there's one other question.
Yeah, just one absolute final one, which is for Will. For high traffic sites, it is common to reach large numbers of conversions in a short period. Should these organizations prolong an experiment to ensure they have a representative overall traffic? For example, make sure they have weekdays and weekends, different traffic sources, etc.
That's a really interesting point to do with how things change over time. Yeah, for large e-commerce sites, you are going to get a lot of traffic very quickly. I still think that size is still very important because one thing I didn't really explain was that depending on the size, the effect you want to measure massively impacts how many people you need. So if I was going to measure a 5% impact on conversion rate, I'd need about 6,000 conversion events to be able to tell that difference. So for large organizations, depending on what you're testing, you should still calculate sample size and then work to gain that sample size, even if you think the effect size is going to be very small. In terms of how things change over time, I think that's where doing multiple experiments actually comes into play. So running the test until you reach the sample size, stopping it, and then doing a validation test at another period of time will solve this problem. And I wouldn't worry so much about waiting to ensure that you've captured all trends of seasonality, things that could happen externally, because realistically, you can't account for them all the time. You just have to keep testing and keep monitoring.
Great. Okay, thank you very much all for your questions, and I'm sure you'd like to join me in thanking our speakers today. I think it's been a fantastic session. We'll be following up with some of Qubit's other research, which goes along with this. So if you didn't catch the links, then you will get shared on it. Thank you very much. Hope to speak to you soon. Bye.